At the end of 2022, several rumors began to swirl in the church that turned out to not be true. These various rumors all had one thing in common. They could all be sourced to legitimate sources within the Roman Curia, whether they were priests, bishops, or high-ranking lay employees who had the faith and loved the church and hated everything that the Bergoglian modernists are doing to both. But numerous rumors that should have been true turned out not to be true at all. But curiously, one of the highest profile examples of a rumor that turned out to be false has been given new life. It turned out it wasn't actually false at all, that it was true. And now mainstream Catholic news sources are reporting the rumor that Cardinal Wilmer is about to get named to a critical post in the dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, to put it mildly critical. Let's go over that story and why his appointment is going to be catastrophically bad for the church. Francis's appointment of a pernicious, unbelievable, and unbelieving heretic to a critical post in the Roman Curia, a post in the past held by Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger for 20 years or more before he became Pope Benedict XVI, a post that makes anyone who holds that office instantly more likely to be chosen by his brother bishops to be Pope at the next conclave. That's the office we're talking about here. When Rorate Caeli reported this in December, and then the story didn't materialize, it appeared that this was another case of Rome plugging leaks in their offices by putting bad information out on purpose. Now we see something else may have been going on, waiting until certain cardinals were out of the way of Francis. We'll get more to that at the end. From Gloria TV, headline: the German fan of the James Martin ideology, Heiner Wilmer, aka the Bishop of Hildesheim, is still a very likely candidate as a prefect of the Doctrine of the Faith. Mesa and Latino.it writes that Wilmer's appointment would be a, quote, unprecedented disaster, as he is a heretic who supported the former priest, heretic and schismatic, Eugene Druermann, whom he called a, quote, prophet of our time, who was misunderstood by the church, end quote. Outside of Germany, you've probably never heard of Druermann. So let's stop there. And before we go to that Mason Latino article, we'll talk about him. Eugene Druermann is a former Catholic priest whose ideas and advocacy laid the groundwork for the heretical and schismatic German synodal way, a movement of the German bishops that Rome finds so objectionable that Francis has tried on numerous occasions to actually stop. And he's actually tried several times to get the Germans to actually work with the Universal Church to adopt their ideas, not to move ahead without them. Even recently, the Vatican issued a letter to the German bishops telling them to wait for the Universal Church and the Synod on Synodality and not to act to change the Church on their own. Druermann is a priest who wanted to change Church teaching on that sin that James Martin has an unhealthy focus on. He seems very, very interested in a particular sin, and this German priest was likely that too, as well as other things the German synodal way is focused on. And while Francis has publicly rejected the German synodal way numerous times, the bishop who is one of its chief architects, Cardinal Heiner Wilmer, is about to get promoted to be the prefect for the dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith, a post previously held, like I said, by Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger and also by Cardinal Gerhard Mueller. So with that context, it's worth noting that Wilmer's posting to this job resurfaced in the aftermath of the death of Benedict XVI and Cardinal George Pell. Dr. Micah Hickson reported on Twitter a few days ago that Cardinal Pell was one of the German bishops who apparently somehow used his internal influence in Rome to block Wilmer's appointment. Now that Pell is gone, as well as Benedict XVI, the appointment of the architect of the German synodal way is free to move ahead. This is all coming from reputable sources in Europe. Mesa and Latino's reporting on this has actually been stellar. Here they follow through with a republication from an Italian website that is basically like the National Catholic Reporter, so you can see what the modernists are saying. Here's the European modernist cheerleading on this. Quote, for over a month, the conservative front has been in fibrillation after the hypothesis that Francis has a ready promotion for Heiner Wilmer, one of the most progressive in an episcopate dominated by progressives, has begun to gain ground. The theologian Eugene Druermann, already suspended ad divinis by the Vatican for his theses, until his departure from the church, considers him an authentic outsider, as well as his favorite dolphin. I think something gets lost in translation there. Anyway, For 5 years at the head of the Diocese of Hildesheim, Wilmer, 61, a Tehonian religious and former superior general of the Priests of the Sacred Heart, has, however, shown great courage in several situations. For example, when at the height of the 2020 affliction and state responses and overreaches to it that prevented church attendance in Germany, he did not hesitate to rail against state action banning the Mass. He has also harshly criticized the Vatican approach aimed at protecting the system. He has stated on several occasions that abuses of power are in the DNA of the Church. He is a firm supporter of the Laudato Si cause. In an interview, he even expressed admiration for Roberto Saviano's work in the fight against the Italian syndicates. Certainly his open-minded views on the female priesthood or on the abolition of celibacy do not let that large and vast slice of the decidedly more traditionalist church sleep peacefully, which would like a less radical and more open-minded theologian to head the former holy office. Concerns have reached the point of having the more conservative fringes write a letter disseminated via the web. The website blog.mesalatino.it has sent an appeal to the Pope and the cardinals of the College of Cardinals, expressing fears for Wilmer's candidacy. And then here they quote something I'm about to read to you in full. "It would be just disastrous. We write to you with heart in hand so that such a disaster for the Church may be avoided." End quote. Mesa and Latino are not the only European media outlet joining in putting Rome on notice. Other news sites in Europe are joining in objecting to this, and they have actually all published that letter that they just quoted simultaneously. I have the full open letter these several media outlets have published simultaneously in opposition to this cardinal's appointment to the most critical office in Rome. The letter is blistering and short, and it's like the polar opposite of that long quote I just read to you. It doesn't hold back any punches on the appointment of this heretic to one of the key posts of the Roman Curia. This post, by the way, again, I need to repeat this, would make it possible for this pro-James Martin extreme modernist to follow Francis into the papacy at the next conclave. Someone who thinks the church was built wrong, basically. Anyway, here's the open letter from various independent media outlets in Europe objecting to the appointment of Cardinal Heiner Wilmer to the prefect of the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. Open letter on the probable appointment of Bishop Wilmer as prefect of the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. To His Holiness Pope Francis, to the most reverend eminences, cardinals of the Holy Roman Church, to the most reverend excellencies, the archbishops and bishops, in December of last year we learned that Bishop Heiner Wilmer of Hildesheim, Germany, was to be appointed prefect of the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. At the same time, however, we received news that the appointment was discarded, in part because of the intervention of numerous cardinals and bishops, who had and have the church and Catholic doctrine at heart. Unfortunately, in recent days, it seems that Bishop Wilmer's candidacy is back in vogue, and that his appointment may be coming soon. We would quietly like to remind all of you, to the Roman Curia, as we did last month, that the appointment of the aforementioned Bishop Heiner Wilmer would be an unprecedented disaster, as he has repeatedly and pertinaciously sided against the Church with statements that, beyond being heretical, border on delusional, and has even supported the work of Eugene Druermann, a former Catholic priest, heretic, and schismatic. This alone would suffice to set aside the appointment. We take the opportunity to recall several quote-unquote remarks made by Bishop Wilmer. Here's the first. Eugene Druermann is a prophet of our time who is misunderstood by the Church. Abuse of power is in the Church's DNA. Sometimes I think, who exactly determines what is Catholic? We keep acting as if it's the hierarchy, as if we, bishops, are entitled to the Catholic label. And this is wrong. We are not a German version of Consumer Reports, their organization that is involved in investigating and comparing goods and services in an unbiased way, founded in 1964. We are to be receivers and listeners, learning in dialogue with Catholic men and women, but also with Christians of other denominations and non-believers. If this is theologically clear, so are the consequences on the Ted McCarrick problem. To curb evil in the church, there needs to be an effective check on power in the church. We need a distinction of powers, a system of checks and balances. Additionally, in September 2022, Bishop Wilmer supported a German Synodal Way resolution to change Catholic doctrine on the flesh and openly lamented its failure to pass. We are writing to you from the heart so that such a disaster for the church may be avoided. Signed, the Mesa in Latino editorial board. End quote. Okay, so for me, the most stunning part about all of this isn't the ecumenical nonsense this guy believes, nor even the Francis endorsing the German Synodal Way by appointing one of his architects to such a high post in Rome. We've seen this kind of stuff before from him. It's Cardinal Wilmer's statement that abuse of power is in the DNA of the church. Think about what he is saying. Our blessed Lord designed the church to misuse its power. That is what he is saying. The church was founded by Christ on the rock of Peter. But this church, founded by Christ, has, according to this cardinal, wicked misusing of its power encoded in its DNA, in its very design. Either he is saying Christ designed the church to do evil in the world, or he's denying that Christ founded the church itself. Either of those claims is blasphemous and heretical, but coming from a cardinal who is, well, let's be real, openly calling for the changing of the church's teachings on numerous subjects that the world really wants the church to change their teachings on, that really shouldn't be surprising. Wilmer is a heretic's heretic, and he'd make a fine prefect for the dicastery of modernism for Francis. He'd be a willing accomplice in tearing down the church and in the building of the prophesied ape of the church, which is the ongoing project of Francis. I'm curious, though, what do you think of this story? What do you think about the story disappearing from the news right before Benedict passed away, and then suddenly and mysteriously reemerging after Cardinal Pell passed away? It's almost as if, and I can understand why somebody would believe it, it's almost as if the roadblocks to his appointment were eliminated. Am I implying too much here? Let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. So sharing this on social media, that helps a lot too. So always pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.